Jaire Alexander signing with the Baltimore Ravens and the circumstances around it show this was a breakup that ultimately both sides wanted.
You are Locked On Packers, your daily Green Bay Packers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Packers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Peter Bukowski, and I cover the Packers for The Leap, a newsletter I would love for you to subscribe to. Follow me on Twitter, Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast on Twitter, Locked On Packers. Like us on Facebook. Subscribe to the podcast, iTunes, Spotify. Wherever you find podcasts, you will find Locked On Packers, the number one Packers podcast on the internet. And the show for fans who know what happened, they want to know why and how. Thanks to everyone who makes Locked On Packers their first listen every day. We hope you like starting your day with us as much as we like starting our day with you. Jaire Alexander is a Baltimore Raven on a 1-year, $4 million deal that could be a $6 million deal. I would like to remind some of you, when I proposed a deal that would pay him $10 or $11 million in total with incentives, you thought I was being unreasonable. He got less than half that in terms of actual money. This and the circumstances around it tell us Jaire Alexander just didn't want to be in Green Bay anymore. The same way the Green Bay Packers really just didn't want Jaire Alexander to be in Green Bay anymore. Now, I don't want to overstate the degree to which the offer that was apparently presented to Ja says, oh, we just didn't want you. Like when the Packers make an offer to Jordy Nelson that is insulting, that's proof they don't want him. I don't think they made an insulting offer to Aaron Jones, but they made an offer that basically said, we'd like to have you back, but only if you're willing to take the absolute bare minimum. It seems like the Packers offered a pretty similar financial package for Jaire Alexander compared to the one he ultimately signed. $4 million, up to $6 million in incentives. But the structures were different. The requirement in the incentives were different. And according to Jaire Alexander's dad, and I don't want to rely on that as a source because there's a lot of reasons for that, conflict of interest, those kinds of things. I just don't think it's like the most journalistically ethical thing to do. But if it can provide us a frame of reference, let's use it. It seems like the deals were similar. We know the reporting was it was a deal that was highly incentivized. The reporting was he took less money to play in Baltimore. So then the reality is he just didn't want to be in Green Bay anymore. And part of the reason is because Green Bay didn't want him to be in Green Bay anymore. And it is, I think, fair to wonder if the Packers hadn't handled it this way, would he have taken the pay cut that was ultimately offered? I think the answer is no. Because the reporting over the course of the last few months has been he just wasn't interested in taking a pay cut at all. So, when the league speaks on this, though, like Aaron Jones got signed the next day for more money. Marginally more money, but more money. It took over a week for Jaire Alexander to end up being signed, and he got marginally more money than like Eric Stokes. $4 million? Eric Stokes got a shade over $3 million. Like, that's what we're talking about here. So there wasn't like, oh, the Packers lowballed him, and so of course he'd want to leave. No. This was his value to the rest of the league. So this idea of, oh, the Packers wanted him to play for free. He ultimately signed the deal that was pretty similar in structure to what Green Bay was offering, it seems. It has to be said, there is a fundamental difference between the team that paid you a top of market deal that then grew frustrated with your inability to be on the field. I'm sure Jaire Alexander saw the posts on social media from fans pretty pissed. And the team leaks damaging information about you. They think you're soft, openly try and trade you, and ultimately offer this pay cut. I can understand from Jaire Alexander's perspective going, no thanks, just not interested. Compared to a Baltimore Ravens team that, in a good situation in Baltimore, they were a better team last year than Green Bay. They need a corner. One of his good friends from college is there, not unlike Devontae Adams. That's a good situation. It's like the meme of the guy coming in and saying something to the woman at the desk, and then the large gentleman who's not as handsome as the first guy says the same thing, and the woman goes, "Hello, human resources." Like, that's the difference. When it's the other team, the team with an appealing situation that you don't have this baggage and this scar tissue with, offers you a somewhat similar package, versus this team that you have this ugliness with, it's not surprising he'd go, I'll take that one. And so ultimately we land with the Packers didn't really want to bring Jaire Alexander back. And I don't think Ja really wanted to be back in Green Bay at that money after everything that had happened over the course of this offseason. And I think ultimately the Packers are okay with that. Like, they offered this deal. I don't think they really accepted or expected him to take it. But I do think it was the deal that they thought was reasonable for them. And by the way, they look right. It was a reasonable deal. There is in fact a point at which the money becomes such that it makes way more sense to have him on your team than not. This was certainly that amount. This is well below what I thought that amount would be. And so had Alexander been willing to take it, it would have made sense for Green Bay to move forward with it. And I think if you want to be a little cynical here, you could say, why not offer a little bit more than this and keep him? Because it would have made more sense at $7 or even $8 million in total compensation, and you have the money. Like, if you want to be critical of the Packers, I think that's the criticism. But the league showed you what the market value was. So the Packers offered a market value deal for a player who signed somewhere else. That's going to happen. I don't think there was ever really a situation where Alexander was going to come back. The well was poisoned. And so from that standpoint, this is the outcome that was always by far the most likely. There was that little, spot in there. We talked about this, the reporting about, actually things are good. I think that was a last-ditch effort to get him traded. And by the way, that is the Alexander camp perspective, that the proposal that was offered, the contract that was offered specifically to make him more appealing in a trade, so that someone is not having to take on $17 million of salary and then renegotiate a new deal. And maybe that was, and maybe that was a smart thing for Green Bay to do. Hey, let's redo the deal, and then we'll trade you. My understanding, by the way, of how this all went down, there was some reporting that they were going to, despite it being post-June 1, that they were going to be declining to spread the cap hit out as a post-June 1 and instead take it all together. My understanding, based on conversations and league sourcing, I spoke to someone who knows these things about contracts in the league, and they were like, they signed a new deal that accelerates everything into 1 year, so that it functions as if this were a pre-June 1 cut. So it's a salary nuance. It's not that important. But ultimately, the Packers are going to take all of the cap hit this year and then have a clean cap sheet on Ja in 2026. That makes a lot of sense. Here's the bigger problem for the Packers from a macro sense. They have had some really, really good players. And they have paid those really, really good players. And it hasn't worked out. We'll talk about it next on Locked On Packers. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. Track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so stop just managing your money and start building wealth. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. Plus, managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. Jaire Alexander was, at one point, the best or second best corner in the NFL. And in 2020, that 2020 season, Green Bay had the best quarterback in the NFL, the best left tackle in the NFL, the best receiver in the NFL, and arguably the best corner in the NFL. A pretty rare feat. 4 of the 5 ultra premium positions in the NFL. And they were getting ready to pay Rashawn Gary. None of those contracts worked. Aaron Rodgers signed a top of market deal in 2018 and then signed another top of market deal after 2021. David Bakhtiari got his top of market deal and tore his ACL like 2 minutes later. And we know what happened from there with the rehab and the setbacks and just a brutally difficult situation for him physically, for his body to let him down like that. It just sucks. It is no fault of David Bakhtiari's that contract did not work out. It was brutally bad luck. So I'm not blaming the player here. But it must be said that if he stays healthy, they probably win at least 1, if not 2 Super Bowls in that stretch, because they had this elite group of talent. Davante Adams wants a top-of-market receiver contract. The Packers say, we're going to give you one, but according to Davante, lowball him to the point that you poison the well. And then by the time they actually offered him a top-of-market deal, he's like, no, trade me. I'm out. Aaron Rodgers gets his top-of-market deal. We know how that worked out. He plays 1 season on that contract. Insists, oh, no, I didn't want a top of market deal. I don't have to be paid like the highest paid quarterback. That reporting's not accurate. And then he gets paid like the highest paid quarterback. And it's like, well, the number was off. And I have always suspected he went back and asked them to change the number so the number wouldn't be right. I know that that's a conspiracy, and it's ironic that I'm endorsing a conspiracy theory about Aaron Rodgers. But that is my mini conspiracy theory there. That deal did not work. And then now we have Jaire Alexander, a top of market deal, a top of market player, and truly elite player. But the deal doesn't work because ultimately he doesn't play out the contract. This is why Green Bay structures their contracts the way that they do. It is 2 years, and we'll see. Because even for the best players at the most important positions, there's no guarantee it's going to work out. There's no guarantee those players can stay healthy. There's no guarantee those players can maintain their level of play. It's why when the Packers maxed out the credit card, they had to reset the roster. When you have to move on from David Bakhtiari, well, now you got to find a replacement for David Bakhtiari, and they're still looking. It's why when you move on from Davante Adams, you got to find a replacement for Davante Adams, and they're still looking. You move on from Jaire Alexander, you got to find a replacement for Jaire Alexander. They're still looking. Now they have a quarterback. That's the good news. And they may have, the sort of spiritual successor to David Bakhtiari and someone like Zach Tom, who can come in and just be if not, David Bakhtiari was the best or second best left tackle in the NFL for a stretch there. I don't know that Zach Tom is ever going to be that, but a really, really, really good player. That elite level player. We're doing a Locked On Top 100 and position top 10s coming up And I had Zach Tom in my top 100. Higher than I actually ended up thinking I would, frankly, as I put name for name on the page. It's an interesting exercise to do. We'll talk about it on the show. Now, I don't think that has led the Packers to build a team without truly elite players. But it stands out to me, and this was something that I was just having a conversation with Peacock and Williamson about. We'll have that episode actually in this feed next week. The Packers, they don't have those top of market players. They have the top of market quarterback. But, they just paid Rashawn Gary, but that was not at the top of the market. It was a big money deal, but not the top of the market. Kenny Clark, they just paid a big money deal, but not at the top of the defensive tackle market. The nose tackle market maybe, but not the defensive tackle market. And he played more 3 technique last year than nose tackle anyway. Beyond that, like Elton Jenkins, I don't think that was ever at the top of the guard market. Maybe he wants top of market center money. Maybe he doesn't. But it does make you wonder if this is the better way to build the team. Because those 2020 and 2021 teams, for as talented as they were, they had clear flaws. Like cornerback 2 on the 2020 team was a major problem. And you could even make it, just cornerback in general after Jaire Alexander. There were some question marks with the offensive line, especially once the injury happened. Okay, how do you manage this? Billy Turner, how do you move Elton Jenkins? Like, what's the best play here? 2021, and by the way, 2020 linebacker was a question. 2021, you bring in Devondre Campbell. He plays at this incredible level for you, but you're still like, Ja was out. You lost to Darius Smith, who, by the way, you were paying a bunch of money. You were trying to put together this offensive line. Did you have all the right pieces in the right places? The special teams was a nightmare. Now, that's not a money problem, but it's hard to have balance on any team. I think those 2020 and 2021 teams were good enough to win a Super Bowl. I've always thought that and will always believe that. But it does create an interesting contrast to me from a thought experiment standpoint to think like, what is it actually better to build a team of a bunch of really solid to good players and maybe 1 or 2 elite players at key positions? Quarterback being the one. That's the one to me. If Jordan Love can be the 6th best quarterback in the league, the 7th best quarterback in the league, in the territory where like, oh yeah, like there's not a gap between Justin Herbert and Jordan Love. The Packers can win the Super Bowl. They don't need him to be Lamar Jackson MVP. They don't need him to be Josh Allen MVP or Patrick Mahomes MVP. 50 touch. They don't need that. Teams that have real flaws need that. In fact, I was going over the Bills roster. I've made this comparison before with the Packers and the Bills. I think the Packers have a better roster. The Bills have Josh Allen and the Packers don't. When you have a great quarterback, he can paper over some of those issues. If Jordan Love can be a great quarterback, even if he's not Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, you have a chance to win with this team. But he needs to be better than he was last year in order for that to be true, or you need some more players to come in. I am still fascinated by this idea of roster balance. If you have a really good coach and a really good quarterback, and then a really good but not great roster, how far can that take you? How far can that take you? I think that is going to be something that a number of teams are going to try and do this year, whether intentionally or unintentionally. And the Packers are one of them. Now, I went on with Kevin Ostreicher from Locked On Ravens to talk about Jaire Alexander. Interesting to hear his perspective on this and for us to dig into that. So my conversation with Kevin Ostreicher is coming up next on Locked On Packers.
The Baltimore Ravens signed Jaire Alexander to a 1-year deal, $4 million, worth up to $6 million with some incentives in there. And here to break Jaire down with me is a man who knows him very well, covering him over in Green Bay. It is Peter Bukowski, the host over at Locked On Packers. And Peter, I remember us going back and forth over the last few years. I was offering you 5th-round picks, 4th-round picks. I want a Jaire in Baltimore. The Ravens get him for free. Nothing. They don't have to give Green Bay anything here. Let's start off with why it didn't work in Green Bay. Green Bay cuts him, apparently is trying to work out a restructured contract, asked him to take less money. Was it mainly just due to the injuries that this didn't work out and Green Bay didn't see the value in paying him that much money due to the on-field lack of it for him?
I would like to tell you that it was just the injuries. I don't believe it was just the injuries. I think there is a personality part of this that we can't ignore. It did not go over well when he made himself captain 2 years ago in Charlotte for the Panthers game. And it reportedly, according to ESPN's reporting, the Packers believed there were times, whether it was last year or before, that Jaire Alexander could have played through an injury, but didn't. And that there was some frustration internally. And I knew as soon as that report came out, Kevin, it was over in Green Bay. Because when you do that, when you leak that to the media, and by the way, what was reported was like multiple sources in the Green Bay organization were frustrated with this. That tells me coaches, players, like there was a frustration in the organization about this issue of people being like, hey, are you going to play? And if not, like, why not? Are you sure you can't do this? And so once you call a player soft like that, which is really what you do when you're saying that, like, we don't think you're tough, it's over, man. Like, it just is not going to work. And I think that ultimately that's the reason that we're here going, the Packers made a similar offer to Baltimore. Jaire Alexander ultimately takes the Baltimore offer. And I think part of that is, it's just different when your team that has already poisoned the well, publicly said we want to trade you, publicly leaked that you are soft, and then made you or suggest you take a massive pay cut. The pay cut part feels like a slap in the face. Whereas when Baltimore does it, it's like, hey, look, I know I haven't been healthy. Like, I've got to earn this. I've got to do this. It's a fresh start. It becomes a much more appealing thing. So I think the Packers would have, like, if Ja would have signed the deal that he signed in Baltimore in Green Bay, the Packers would have done that. But I think it's also the case that Green Bay was ready to move on, and they're not gonna be listening to Celine Dion tonight because Jaire Alexander is not around anymore. Like, they're fine moving forward here.
When Jaire was
very timely reference, pulling the
Celine Dion. Right, seriously. when Jaire was healthy, when he was on the field for Green Bay, I think that people reference the injuries and say, oh, he's fallen off as a player, right? Oh, he's not the same that he was. Is that true? Or is this the same all-pro Jaire that you got accustomed to knowing over his first few years in Green Bay when he was there?
Yeah. I got in trouble last year for saying that he had not played to the standard. And that's almost not fair, because in 2020, you could make the case he was the best corner in the NFL. In fact, Pro Football Focus did make the case he was the best corner in the NFL that season. And that was the Jalen Ramsey season. You may recall. You have to be really good to be that level at the same time as someone like Jalen Ramsey in his prime. He got a top of market deal and got hurt in 2021. Shoulder injury midway through the year. And that's problematic, right? So then 2022, he had an all-pro season. But when you watched him, he got up for the big matchups, and it was like the Titans on Thursday night in a game that they didn't, they thought they were going to, sort of walk through, and he's getting beat deep down the sideline. It's like, I'm sorry, what? It's Equanimous St. Brown for the Bears beating him on a go route down the sidelines. Like, it's those kinds of matchups where you're just sort of like, dude, can you just lock in? Like, we know you're good enough to do this. And then in 2023, he got hurt. 2024, he got hurt. But there were still moments when, like, healthy Jaire Alexander, the pick 6 against Tennessee is a perfect encapsulation of that. But I think last year and the year before, he played more in that I'm a top 8 to 12 corner in the NFL versus I'm a top 1 to 4 corner in the NFL. Like the guys that he was in the class with at his peak prime, right now, he has to reprove that he's in that group for me to put him in that group. Like going into this season, especially understanding he's probably like, 7 games over each of the last 2 seasons. I think you have to do some major proving it moving forward. But yeah, when he's out there, he's going to make plays. The interceptions have come up, and he had the huge interception against Dak Prescott in the playoff game 2 years ago. He's still capable of making those high-end plays. Did he have, did he get burned by A.J. Brown in week 1? Yes. Did he come back with a huge interception to turn the momentum in that game? Yes. So he's still capable of being a playmaker for a defense, especially a defense like Baltimore, where they're not going to ask him to do everything. And it is interesting, Kevin, that the Ravens defensive coordinator was a finalist for the Packers defensive coordinator job before he decided to stay in Baltimore. The Packers ultimately bring in Jeff Hafley, but now Ja gets to go play with that coach.
Everything just links back to one another.
Yeah.
It all comes together. And I love that. And so look, if the Ravens are getting that 8 to 12 corner for $4 million, and you mentioned it earlier where, it feels different when your own team is asking to take that cut as compared to a new team doing it. If they're getting him at that price for an top 8 to 12 corner in the league, you're taking that 10 times out of 10, in my opinion. But Peter, where do Jaire Alexander's strengths and weaknesses lie on the field? What is he good at? What is he not good at? What situations are you putting him in, and where aren't you putting him?
I would say early in his career, you could ask him to do anything and he could do it. His coming out party was against Brandon Cooks in LA when Sean McVay is making his meteoric rise, and Ja was just wore the same jersey as Brandon Cooks all over the field. They let him just man up all over the field. Brandon Cooks, especially at the time, one of the most dynamic vertical receivers in the league. He's not that guy anymore as a man-to-man cover corner. But he can still mirror and match. He's still explosive. He also used to be one of the best support corners in the NFL. He'd come up, he'd take on blocks at the point of attack, he'd make tackles. Since the shoulder injury in 2021, he has been less willing to make a tackle. Much more, I'm just going to throw my shoulder into him. I'm going to duck my head. I'm going to dive, that kind of thing. And so where he's thrived and why I think he would have had a really big season last year had he been able to stay healthy, is in a zone coverage scheme where he is able to read the quarterback and break on the ball. His click and close is still explosive, and he's got really good instincts. He reads quarterbacks well. He understands routes and how teams are going to try and attack him. He understands where his help is, so he's going to take these calculated risks. And he likes, from off coverage, he is dynamic. Can he still be a press corner? Yeah, we saw it 2022. Right, against Justin Jefferson, yes, with safety help, but they clouded to that side. They let him play cover 2, press Justin Jefferson. He's still able to come up and do that too. So if Baltimore wants to, hey, come play some press coverage. Now, if they want him to play 50 reps of press man, I don't know that that's the best way to, number one, keep him healthy, and number two, maximize his skill set at this point. But on 3rd and 8, yeah, he can still run with, the Jamar Chases and T. Higgins of the world. Is that how you want him to spend his whole day? No, probably not. So that's going to be up to Baltimore to find the best way to use all these guys. I mean, I think they have a diverse skill set of guys, a diverse group. So you can approach it almost like a basketball team, and hope that you can kind of mix and match in a given day. I'd love to know if they're going to use him in the slot a little bit more, especially on 3rd downs. I mean, I know Marlon Humphrey has played there and played well there. But this has been something Packer fans, Kevin, have been talking about over the last couple of years. Like, could they allow him to play in the slot a little bit more? He has the body type for it. The problem is you don't want him on there on 1st and 2nd down because of the run support question. Like, is he going to give you what you need there? But on 3rd and 8, 3rd and 10, if, let's say the Ravens or the Bengals may be a bad example because you might want Humphrey on Chase in the slot. But I'm trying to think of like an AFC team where you've got a little bit of a shiftier guy, and then you want to put, Ja in the slot there. An opportunity like that could be something that makes a lot of sense. You can mix and match matchups that way. All right. Thanks to Kevin for having me on. Fun to talk with him. He's actually going to be filling in for me on Locked On Sports Today next week, as I am going to take a little break from that. We will still have shows next week. We'll still have a show tomorrow, but we are going to go to 3 days a week next week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and the following week also will be, that's a holiday week. That's the 4th of July, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. We've got some interviews coming up. Joe Thomas coming up on the program. He comes back. Always awesome to talk with him. Offensive line talk. Who knows? Maybe there'll be some moves made, some contracts signed. That's something that I think we have to keep our eye on here. The Packers have been known to make moves like that, whether it's a new player or an extension. Follow me on all the social medias, Peter_Bukowski on Twitter and Instagram. Follow the podcast wherever you find podcasts in terms of your listening apps, Spotify, Apple, all that good stuff. And then you can watch us on YouTube. We're there on YouTube. Always, you can watch us there so you can stay locked on Packers.